right, week 3 of 7 weeks of digital photography. We're now going to talk about portrait photography. And for your homework, you were supposed to look through 2 of the chapters in the small book that talks about portrait tips and some wedding photography, which is obviously a lot of portrait photography as well. So we're going to just go over some of the highlights, and we're going to do some practicing today. So the best lens for portrait photography, or if you have a point and shoot, the point that you want to zoom out to, is somewhere in the 85 to 100 zone. This lens that I have on right here goes from 18 to 135. So somewhere in about this point of zoom out to here is where I would want to be for a portrait. And there's a couple of reasons. And the first one has to kind of do with comfort, because does this make you comfortable? Yes or no? No. Okay, I didn't think so. But if I'm back here and I have that same exact filling frame, is that a little bit better? Yeah. People don't really like it when you get in their space. They like that little bit of personal distance. Also, when you have wide-angle lenses, the ones that get in everything, like an 18 millimeter or even wider, you get distortion. There's a little bit of bending at the edges. And this is, I have to flip these two, it's mixed up. The one that's shot with the good lens, or the good focal point, the 85 to 100 zone, is the one on the left. That's this one. The one on the right is shot with a 50 millimeter lens. And can you see how it's a little bit wider, how she looks a little bit distorted? So if this is the only picture you saw, you would probably not notice it at all. But when you see the two side by side, it's easy to see the distortion. So go for those focal lengths where you can stand back a ways and zoom in to fill the frame. All right, what aperture? So if everything is equal and you can choose an aperture of f11, which is fairly small, right? f11s are small compared to 2.8s are big. If you have enough light or studio lighting with flashes and everything, an f11 is a really good aperture setting to be on for portraits because you get a good sharpness. We talked about f8 and f11 being the aperture that most closely replicates the human eye. It's what we see. So everything on the face is going to be in good focus. Now, I take a ton of people pictures, portraits, at a much lower aperture, but I'm far away from them, and my intent is to blur the foreground and the background, like the senior shots where they're outside in the woods. But then you have to be far enough away that 2.8, remember we talked about, it's not literal, but if you could pretend that from me to that tree out there, halfway between there is where my subject is standing, and I focus in on her, 2.8 feet of depth are going to be crystal clear in focus. So from here to her face, to her shoulders, behind her is in focus, everything else is blurry. Does that make sense? That's the small area that's in focus. So when you have a lot of distance, that can work. But if I'm this close to you and I'm doing a 2.8 and I focus on your eyeball, there's a chance that your ears could be a little out of focus, your tip of your nose could be a little out of focus when you're down to those really low focal points and you're close. Okay? The depth of field is a lot smaller. So f11 is the good magic number. If you're in aperture priority mode, you can set it to that and then just go about taking pictures. Works quite well. Backgrounds, we talked about having simple, clean backgrounds. So in this room, there's pretty much nowhere. This is like seizure-inducing in this room when I look around this room right now. There's a lot going on in here. There's lights everywhere. There's way too much going on. So if I were to say we're going to go out and take pictures, people pictures today, but we got to stay inside, where are some guesses? Where would you guys maybe head? If I said stay inside this building but go take portraits.
Stairs.
Where?
Stairs.
The stairs, okay. Where else? In this building.
The cafeteria.
Yeah, cafeteria's got good lighting, or natural lighting at least. Any other thoughts? How about if I said go right out in that hall? Would that be your first choice either? At the one that goes this way. I'm looking at it because it's got a green wall, and it's got a green glow with the fluorescent lights. Like we would all have this green hue on us. It would be really horrific. All the fluorescent lights in here are gross and not fun for taking pictures. So you kind of have to look for a place that has natural light. So look for a plain background as possible. In studios, you know, they have those rolls. Either they have canvas behind or they have paper rolls that come down. Big giant rolls of white paper at a craft store can do the same for you at home. If you wanted to set up a little mini studio, you could get some of that craft paper on a roll and set it up, and you would have that seamless background that would come down. You can also buy canvas backgrounds. You could buy curtains as a background if you wanted to, a cloth background. Yes?
So white paper would actually like just come up as like a light almost?
Well, it reflects also, but have you seen like product shots where it looks like they're on like a seamless background, like there's no corner of the wall? That's kind of like this white backdrop that kind of curves down and the product sits on it. And of course they have lights on both sides, they have it well lit, but it's a good neutral background and it's cheap. You can just go buy some white paper.
I got a light box and it actually comes with like 4 different color backgrounds.
Yeah. Do you have one?
It's in my car right now.
Really? Maybe at break you could get it. Those are really fun. It's a little pop-up one. Yeah. I've seen those where, like for product photography, or if you're selling stuff on eBay, where it, you know, you light it from both sides or the front or the top, and you get that cool seamless background that just focuses on your product. So. All right, if you're outside taking portraits, talking back about portraits, you want to keep your background as simple as possible. And if you can't, you want to blur it out, right? You want to use the low aperture to kind of blur out the background. Try to keep the background no brighter than your subject whenever possible. So that's the example where she is the brighter. That's going to help with metering and getting your lighting right. But what about all those cool shots that we've looked at where the sun is behind them and they're backlit, or it is brighter back here? Does that mean you don't take that shot? No, you just change the way you're metering. So if this were all super bright and the sun were back here, so the background is brighter than your subject, what are some options you can do to fix it to make it look good? We talked about last week.
Oh, the flash fill?
Flash fill. So if you have a flash and you're close enough distance to make the flash can work, absolutely. You guys know that you can't be back 30, 40 feet and have your flash do anything, right? It's got to be within 10, 12 feet for your flash really to help. What else could you do? Yes. Yep, the metering. Change the metering modes we talked about last week, where if it's all bright back here, if you're in that matrix or evaluative, it's going to measure every single cell and give them equal weight. So all these bright pixels are going to throw it off. So if you go to either center weighted or spot metering, you're going to get a light measurement on your subject. It's going to decide what the proper exposure is for either that one spot or the center that you are choosing, and it's going to make that be the right exposure, and then this would obviously be a little overexposed, but that's okay. If that's a bright background, that'd be okay. All right, another tip that came in your book that makes your portraits look more professional and better and more than a snapshot is this idea of positioning and keeping the eyes up in that upper third part of the frame. And the picture here at the bottom, the two side by side, they're almost identical. The only difference is we see a little bit more of her elbow in this one on the right, but that's really it. Like, we're still seeing the chair and her hand and everything else, but her eyes are up higher in this picture on the right. And how many of you prefer the one on the right? It's just it's a stronger portrait. This is dead space. We don't need it. This is focusing in on her. It's keeping her eyes in that top third. All right. This is your picture. Where are you going to make sure that you focus in on and get crystal clear focus?
Eyes.
Yeah, eyes. Focus on your subject's eyes, period. If you're shooting at f11 especially, you've got tons of depth of field. You'll be fine. Everything's going to be in focus. Nice level of sharpness. Another idea is to zoom in and fill the entire frame. And it's okay to chop off parts of the head because in this case, we know this is intentional, right? But you have seen shots where there's plenty of breathing room all around except for like one part of their head gets cut off, and you know that wasn't intentional. It was just an accident or sloppy photography, right? So zooming in is a good thing to do too. All right, outdoor lighting. Some great outdoor lighting. Actually, today is a great day to take portraits because there's no harsh light. It's all diffused light coming through the clouds. We don't have the hard shadows underneath our eyes or anything like that. If we had leaves on the trees, if we ever get that point again, On a really bright sunny day, you guys have been under a tree and the leaves blow, and like 1 minute you have shade right here and the next minute it's bright sun, like it's all that dappled light. That doesn't look good in a portrait. Make sure you get an all shade or all light. Some ways to improve natural light are these reflectors. And these are small, you can get them even bigger, and they're quite cheap, but this is what it looks like. So this is called a 5-in-1 reflector. And right now you're only seeing 2 options, but if you unzip this, you actually have inside just a diffuser. So on a bright sunny day, this can diffuse the light shining down on your subject. If you've ever seen behind the scenes of like the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition, they're out on the beach, they've got huge versions of this above them to keep the light from being harsh on top of them. So this is 1, 2, 3, and then 4 and 5 are, you can reverse this out. So when light hits white, what does it do? Think back to science. Reflects. When light hits black, what does it do? Absorbs. And then any guess? Well, you probably already read. The silver and gold side is best for outdoor natural light to reflect that. The pure silver is best for inside a studio where your lighting is very precise and controlled and measured, and you want exactly that version of light reflecting, not a warmer, more yellow version of it. So because we're probably going to be inside today, when we walk around, we're going to take these along, and there may or may not be a use for them today, depending on what we do. If the sun were out and it were low in the sky, we could easily bounce it back on our subject if we have a backlit subject. The other thing that you can do with this is, gotta go somewhere and be under a light. All right, I'll face both directions, but right now I'm standing straight underneath this light. You guys see shadows on my face? You guys see shadows on my face? Mm-hmm. Probably under here, whatever. Okay. Get better. Damn, right? Yeah. I think I want to walk around like this at all times. So this is great for portraits as well. Have your subject just hold it. And if you're in a studio, you're very likely lighting them in specific ways and or using reflectors to bounce your light. But having your subject hold this and getting that light to bounce back up and fill in under the neck and under the eyes is really important. You don't want people to have black eyes and black necks and look older than they are. You want to make them look as good as you can.
Just taking a picture for a UFC fight.
True. Then I guess black and blue is good. Yeah. So the idea of taking the shot when you are at backlit subjects. So this is my dog quite a long time ago, and sun was behind him, obviously, sitting on the ground. That's what you get because it's too bright. Right? It's trying to get detail back here, so this is what it's exposing for, and it put all of this in darkness. Then by simply, the sun was pretty low, finding the spot where we could bounce the sun back using a reflector, and getting a little bit lower, able to get this shot. Much different. That's the only difference. I'd changed nothing on the camera settings, just use the reflectors. Looking at this, what depth of field, what kind of aperture was I on? A really low number, yep, because stream blur, right? In focus, not. Even some of the foreground grass up here is not in focus. So this is the level that was in focus, everything else falls out. Okay, so if you ever did film photography back in the day or had those little cameras, little point and shoot, throwaway cameras, the rule of thumb kind of was the sun should be at your back. It should be illuminating whatever subject matter you're taking pictures of. That's not really true, especially with the cameras that we have now. So don't think that the sun has to be behind you at all times. If you're taking a picture of the baseball team at 6 at night and tell them to face the sun, all they're going to do is squint, and they're going to have shadows on their face, and it's not going to be a good option. So having the sun behind people, that backlighting is awesome. Just remember, again, it's bright back here, sun's back here, this is a white background. It's going to want to base the exposure on all this brightness, and it's going to then plunge their faces into darkness. So once again, you have to think of, do I use a flash fill, or do I meter, spot meter, or center weight meter, and make sure that I get a right exposure for them. You got to pay a lot of attention to that when you have backlit subjects or really bright subjects in the background. Good? Okay. Some options for indoor lighting that really work are natural lights, our windows like this. And actually, these windows that don't face the sun, like a north-facing window, is even best because you're not getting that harsh, direct sunlight. You're just getting indirect light. You can position your subject by a window. So in this case, the window's over here, right? Sun's coming in and hitting her on the side, so you're able to stand face on with her. And it's lighting up more of this side of her face. So again, you want to be careful, especially if the lighting is strong, that it's not, you're not getting one of those shots where half of their face is bright and the other half is pitch black, unless that's the look you're going for. But if you want to get a portrait where you can see all of her face, we have to make sure that we're accounting for this side of her face having enough lighting too. So you'd want to meter over here, or maybe just use exposure compensation, meter it for the whole scene, and then bump it up a third or 2/3 of a step to get a little bit more light in to make sure that this side of her is well lit too. Another thing you could do, the window's here, you stand here and you bounce back whatever light you can. You see what you can find to illuminate this side of her face. So if a window gets direct light, like it's south facing and it's the middle of the day and it's really strong, you can try putting up like sheer curtains or clear shower curtains, something to diffuse the light. Dirty windows are great, and probably right now we all have dirty windows because I don't think anybody's been outside to wash their windows. Ever. I don't know that I've ever done it. That's what rain is for. All right, sunset portraits. Looking at this, you think that's an easy shot to get. A lot of different things going on, right? Subject is lit up. And really, to be fair, in this one, it's more than a flash. Or if it's a flash, it's off camera, because it's not straight on, is it? You can kind of tell that she's lit up on this side more. So it's either lighting over here or an off-camera flash that they had mounted on a tripod or they were holding up, and it's coming out the side. But normally when we take a flash picture at night in the dark, if you've ever done this, your subject is super bright, everything else is pitch black, right? We talked about that night portrait scene that you have on your cameras, your point and shoots especially. So that would be good for that because it keeps the shutter open long enough. The flash goes off, and then after that, the shutter stays open even longer to let all this light come in and register. So if you can do this, this is a crazy way. I could never do this on my camera. I don't have enough fingers, but maybe you do. What you would do is you turn your flash off. You don't want it coming up. So turn it off, aim at the sky, hold the shutter halfway down, and meter up here. So this is what you're getting, is this lighting. You want to meter there. Halfway down to read that, and then recompose your shot. So now you're not putting your focal point here, you're bringing it down here. Turn your flash on. So again, depending on how many fingers you have, if you could pop your flash and then go ahead and take the shot. Another thing would be to use the exposure lock. So on the back of your SLRs, there's usually that button. Once you read this exposure, you could lock it in, and then you could recompose the shot and force your flash to go off. Does that make sense? To get all this. Okay. All right, we're going to talk about group shots. Let's say I tell you guys, I want 5 of you to go out, 6 people, and I want 1 person to take a shot of the 5 people. And you guys say, okay, go stand over there. What are those 5 people going to do? Stand in a stinking row. They're going to look like complete mugshot, right? They're going to line up shoulder to shoulder, and they're not even going to be close until you make them. They're going to be 2 feet apart. It's just going to look ridiculous, and they're all going to look really awkward and, you know, whatever. So taking group shots can be tricky. Shooting at f11 is another really good idea because you want to make sure that depending on how many rows or depth of people you have, everybody's in focus. So in this case, there's just 2 different depths, right? There's the 2 up front and the 1 guy in the back. And you can see they're close, aren't they? Do you think they naturally got this close? I doubt it. I'm pretty sure the photographer pushed them in. So We would not want these guys to have good focus and him to have a blurry face. That would not be cool, right? We have to have enough depth of field that everybody's in focus. Think about the football team, high school football team picture where you go out to the bleachers and there's 8 rows of kids. You can't have rows 1 and 2 in focus and rows 4 and 5 all blurry, right? That's not a good idea. So you want to use an f-stop, an aperture that allows for a large depth of field. You do want to focus, in this case, you'd focus on their eyes, and an f11 is going to be good to keep him in focus. If it's the football team with 5 rows of people, you're probably going to focus in on rows 2 or 3, and then 1 and 2 will naturally be in focus, so will 4 and 5, if you have a good enough depth of field. Some ways to arrange group shots. Never say tall people in the back, short people up front, and you get that look that you always get, right? It's ridiculous. What you want to do is arrange people in clusters or around something. So group them around a chair, maybe a column, on a couch, have them sitting. Arrange people in very tight pyramid shapes. Close enough to touch, don't use rows, use clusters. Anybody ever take a picture with a lot of people in it, like maybe a family reunion or a wedding shot or lots of people in it? What's the problem that always happens? Someone's eyes are closed. Getting everybody to have their eyes open is hard, or frankly, getting everybody to pay attention is hard. Somebody's always looking away too. But the eyes are the issue that, like in a wedding photo, I think most people are paying attention and know it's costing money, so let's at least look at the camera. So a good tip from the book was have everybody close their eyes and say, you're going to open them, 3, 2, 1, open your eyes. So everybody's closed, 3, 2, 1, open, and then you probably have your camera on burst mode and you start likely, very likely, one of those shots, everybody's going to have their eyes open. It's going to be good. Much easier than if you say, okay, on the count of 3, I'm going to take it. Nobody blink. 3, 2, 1, and by then everybody's like, don't blink, and they're all blinking. It's just human nature. So this idea is a really good one to try to get everybody to have their eyes open. Having the burst on when you take portraits is a great idea.
Everybody hold their eyes, and at least 3 of them, 10 of them blink.
Even then, right, but then you have a chance, and sometimes people are just a little unnatural at first, but within a half a second, their mouth is kind of settled into a normal look. So, seriously, like you go, So, by doing shooting portraits in burst mode, almost always you find one that has a really good natural look. It's not the first one, it's not the last one, it's somewhere in the burst. All right, how to fix some facial challenges just with positioning and lighting. So if you have someone who is balding and is self-conscious of it, the last thing you're going to do is going to get a high vantage point that's going to accentuate that, right? You're going to shoot from a lower angle. Wrinkles. Have light sources coming straight on, because you know if you've held a flashlight underneath, like the scary thing that kids do, like every wrinkle and every indentation turns into scary looks. So if you light somebody straight on, the light goes into their wrinkles and they disappear. So it's beautiful. Large nose. Pose them so that they're only showing one ear and that they're kind of tipped their chin down a little bit and turned away from the camera. Double chin. Have them look straight towards the camera and kind of extend out. I'm going to do this. Has anybody had a portrait taken lately or remember the joy that it was of the person posing you? Where they do keep twisting and turning and chin down and lean forward. Do you remember that? It's kind of awkward, isn't it? Or it feels weird, but it ends up looking good. You know, the whole chin down, all this nonsense, and by the time it's done, you're like, that's not a bad picture. So they know what they're doing, and as a photographer, if you're going to get into that field, you need to know what you're doing, and you need to pose people. They will not do it naturally unless they are a Hollywood person who always poses, or they are a teenage girl, age 12 to 22 right now. They always pose in every picture, too, I find. They're always doing something. But you have to direct people. That's the bottom line. Some other tips. When you're shooting people, don't shoot shoulders square to the camera and up against the wall. Again, we've got the mugshot. Either have them turn or you get your camera angle a little bit different so that you're not square on to them. If you want people to look slimmer, again, think of that 12 to 22-year-old female demographic right now that's constantly doing something with their hands and their legs and their hips and their this and that. If you stand with your arms to your side, the visual width of me is from outside of elbow to outside of elbow. If you do this, the visual width is from waist to waist. So putting your hands on your waist, angling a little bit, leaning, all that can really make people look different without any Photoshop. If your subject looks uncomfortable, hand them a prop. Babies. How many baby pictures have you ever seen where the baby is sitting there and is just posing and is staring at the camera like, you know, a senior? Doesn't happen, right? They always have a prop. They have a toy. They have Winnie the Pooh sitting next to them. Something's going on. Yeah. How about seniors? What's real popular now with senior photography? We're not going into a studio like we used to. We're doing, yeah. And what are we doing outside? With anything that makes you comfortable, right? Probably, if you're into sports.
It's relevant to what they did, like band or.
Exactly. You got your clarinet. You got your football if you're a football player. You're out with your horse if you're into animals. You're in the country. You're in an urban setting. You're doing something, a prop really helps comfort you. So if you have people that are really uncomfortable having their picture taken, think of ways that you can incorporate their personality into it with either backgrounds, scenes, props, and it's really going to help make them more comfortable in their picture. Again, a lot of people are doing senior pictures because they have a friend with a good camera, whatever. So I suspect all of you have maybe taken a picture of a friend or a family member that you tried to make it more of a cool picture. And you maybe have found this already, that putting them in a different environment or background or giving them a prop really can help make it easier, much easier. Tips for shooting kids, photographing kids, not shooting. I need to update the PowerPoint probably. Oh man, you guys. All right, we're gonna not. The world's gone politically correct mad. I can't even have my normal PowerPoint anymore. So, you're not going to photograph kids from high vantage points unless it's on purpose to show the scale of how small they are in comparison to the world, right? That's on purpose. But if you've got a 3-year-old sitting right there and you stand up here and take the picture, it looks like a stupid snapshot. It's not a good picture. Get down on their level. Get down low, get down to their eye point. Give them a prop. Babies. You've seen all the cool baby photography where they really zoom in and maybe it's just their fat little fingers or their nose or something like that. Those are cool things. Baby pictures, isolating them on neutral backgrounds where the parents like are wearing all black and the baby is really obviously the focal point, something like that. And detail photos of babies. Here's an example of shooting from a human adult vantage point versus just getting down to their vantage point, how different it can be. So it really changes the scale of the picture and makes it more interesting. Also changes the background quite a bit too. Instead of getting 2/3 cement, you get some background. A final thought that I'm going to share with you is on some people photography, but it's not specific to portraits. So I'll show it to you and then I'm going to explain. Your subject doesn't always need to be smiling. They don't always need to be looking at the camera, and they don't always have to be the winner shots. So this is an example of a candid shot of a person. Yes. This is not a portrait. Do you agree? This is not a portrait. A portrait, this is a picture of a person, a candid. But if I said take a portrait of her, she didn't know this was being taken. You didn't direct her. You didn't set her up. This is a candid shot. It's a great photo, don't get me wrong, and you should take these. But for the purpose of the assignment for this next week, where you guys are going to be taking portraits, they're not candid shots. They're not your friend and not paying any attention to you just standing there. Those can be cool, but it's not what I want for this week's assignment. They have to be actively knowing that you're taking their picture. You have to be directing them. You have to be setting them up. They should be looking at the camera or, gazing slightly off camera. It has to be an actual portrait session. They know they're getting their picture taken, not a candid. Okay? So that's got to be clear. Huh? Yeah.
So we're.
So you're gonna. You all know humans. So I want portraits of humans because we all go straight to our pets because they're easy. They don't talk back. I know. I hear you. I know.
I don't know many.
So at least one of your 2 portraits has to be of a human. A live human, not a mannequin or anything else. Let's be clear here. Of the pet pictures, if you do choose to do a pet portrait, it has to be a portrait, not a candid shot. Your dog has to be, you have to be consciously taking pictures, not just getting that amazing shot when they're asleep or something like that. The other thing is that I want them looking at the camera, and I want it to be a pet or an animal that has personality that you're capturing. It's their portrait. Okay? Here's what I don't want, and this honest to God has happened once. Picture of a chicken that was taken from this vantage point. Here's chicken. Chicken is walking away. Not a portrait, people. That is not a portrait.
You got a picture of chicken butt.
Chicken butt. So if you're going to take a portrait of your chicken, it needs to be a glamour shot of your chicken, like a portrait that they would put on their resume. Something serious here, folks, not just a candid shot. One has to be a human. I'll let you do one of a pet because I know everybody loves their pets more than humans lately, me included. So it has to be a portrait, not just a candid.
Just for this assignment, go out
You
and get
have
a
to
dog.
buy a dog.
Yeah.
And then,
You can tell your family I had to buy a dog for this
I got a
class.
cute portrait of my phone.
All right.
You go get a gold side.